Hello and welcome to another video of the Simplified opening series. In today's video we will talk about one of the most popular, if not the most popular, Sicilian out there, the Najdorf Sicilian. Well, having played the Najdorf Sicilian with the black pieces all my life, I think I know a thing or two about it. But I have also faced it with the white pieces so many times, so I kind of think I know both sides of the story. And the story that I want to tell you today starts somewhere in the late 80s or mid 80s approximately, when a group of English players devised a system against the Najdorf Sicilian that later came to be known as the English attack. Now, this English attack features the moves, let me show them on the board in the normal Najdorf position. Features the moves bishop e3, e6 and f3. So bishop e3 followed by f3 and followed by g4, g5 and attack on the king side. It quickly became the most dangerous system against the Najdorf because it was still relatively fresh, unexplored, and a lot of people started playing it. Most notably, even the then world champion Garry Kasparov took it up and used it to great effect with the white pieces. But he was also defending the Najdorf against the English attack, and in those days, after the move bishop e3, thanks to Kasparov efforts, the main move was the move e6, transposing to a sort of Scheveningian structure. When the English attack came to a full force with f3, g4 and so forth, even though the sharp lines with g4 were also explored and so on. So this lasted for quite some time, even though in the beginning of the 90s, the rare move knight g4 started to become an interesting choice that Kasparov, even myself, started using it on an occasion. But the old Najdorf move e5 was, while played, not the main battleground. So the allure of the English attack from a white's perspective was that it led to crazy positions that you could analyze and play, where basically you could attack. You can actually get this standard Sicilian attack where you can sacrifice pieces, you can checkmate your king, checkmate the opponent, and basically enjoy the game. So as a kind of an introduction to these types of attack, I will show you one game of mine from 2006, which is curious because it features a novelty that I invented 4 years prior to that game, but I never had a chance to employ it. So I invented the novelty in 2002 and I got to play it in 2006. And the reason I'm showing you this game is to show you what I think is lacking today when facing the Najdorf. The main reason this is lacking, as you shall see, is in fact the Najdorf move e5, which nowadays is played against practically all white's options. But we will come to that a bit later. So, bishop e3, e6, f3, b5 and queen d2. I won't go much into the move order details. I just wanted to show you the type of position that white is actually very happy to play and should be happy to play because it really offers a lot of tactical possibilities. So knight b d7, there is also the move b4, g4, h6, long castle, bishop b7, and now h4. This was a more or less a tabia, heavily discussed in the 90s and also the noughties, but nowadays it's considered that it's good for white, so it's not really played anymore. After b4, the main move, and one that's still considered the best today, is the move knight a4. And after queen a5, b3 is played, then a3, taking on b4 and so forth, with a massive amounts of theory, which I have also analyzes reaching move 30, 40 and beyond. However, back in those days, I had an interesting idea with the alternative move knight c2. And while recently checking and preparing the material for this video, I put this position to the engine, and I was really very pleasantly surprised to see that my novelty that I came up with in 2002, nowadays the engine considers it as the best move. And not only that, the way the game went, it actually well, it shows that I have played more or less all the best engine moves. Yeah, I was really very happy to discover this. So what's this great novelty of mine? Yeah, knight c2, d5 now, and the novelty is the move knight f4. So there are other moves, theoretical moves, but I came up with this move knight f4, and you can probably understand why, because white is not so subtle about hacking something on e6. So again, I will just say that I invented this in 2002, but I only got to play it in 2006. Yeah. And I remember I analyzed a lot of sharp lines here. For example, e5, which is critical, attacking both knights, and now the best move is bishop h3. Imagine that, yeah, leaving both knights to be attacked and threatening a g5. And you can already sense the atmosphere, yeah, of the game. Yeah, everything is hanging, sharp stuff is happening, and the prize is the head of this king on e8. So let's say d takes e4, ignoring the knights, but now g5 with a complete mess, but quite promising for white, especially if you have done your homework and checked these all possible sorts of sacrifices. The capture on e4, for example, is bad because knight d6, f6, knight e6, queen a5, bishop c4. And this is the typical type of play that white is seeking when there is seemingly no direct win, or the one you could calculate. But long term, this is winning for white because of the weakness of the black king. It can never leave the center, and white will, sooner rather than later, organize his forces to do something in the center, whether on the e file, whether by g5. Yeah, so for example, let's say knight e5, attacking the bishop drops back to b3, knight f3, and now queen g2, threatening g5. And like I said, even though white is a piece down, the fact that neither of the black rooks are playing and the fact that the king is stuck in the center means that long term this is winning for white. So this is something which I think today's treatment against the Najdorf is lacking. I mean, obviously white would like to have it, but black is simply not allowing it. And I think the main reason for this is the employing the choice of e5 move early in the opening. But like I said, okay, I'll come to this a bit later. So in the game, black played the move queen a5, ignoring to taking the piece, knight b3, hitting the queen, yeah, queen a2, and now e takes d5. And I have looked at this, yeah, I have looked, for example, knight d5, bishop c4 is strong, or let's say bishop d5, knight d5, knight d5, again bishop c4, always targeting the e6 pawn. The knight cannot move because the knight is hanging, the rook can come to e1. Very dangerous attack, and the point is that this queen is trapped here. It can't go to a1, the knight is very nicely controlling the escape squares. a4 is available, but it's still a bit slow. My opponent chose e5 here, and now bishop c4. Again, a very strong move. Yeah, I think by here I was on my own, but I managed to find all the best moves over the board. So bishop c4. Now, for example, if e takes f4, bishop takes f4, or bishop takes f4, and already this is another type of the positional, you could say, compensation that white gets for the piece. But again, it's all about the king not running away. Yeah, the rook he1 is coming, and it's problematic. For example, if long castle, queen d4, yeah, and then the queen is coming to a7. So again, this is the type of play that white wants to obtain. So my opponent went a5, intending a4 to get rid of that knight, but now queen d3. Yeah, a very strong move. My justification was if a4, knight c5, and so forth. Yeah, I won't go too much into the details. My opponent now took the piece on f4, and now bishop d4. Bishop f4 was also strong. And after king d8, running away, king d2, I actually managed to trap this queen on a2 after a4, knight a5, and I won the game. Yeah, still a very nice game to look at, and I think a good illustration of what white would like to have against the Najdorf, but is not getting it nowadays. Okay, so what's my big idea here, yeah? Let's go back at the beginning. Now, I mentioned that today's theory is such that against pretty much everything, black goes e5 against the white's attempts. There are in fact only two moves where this move is not so good. One is Fischer's move, the sows in bishop c4, when e5 just really enhances the activity of the light squared bishop. But here the theory after e6, it's, well, even though Kramnik tried to introduce some interesting ideas based on the Velimirovich ideas with bishop e3, queen e2, long castle, and then attack, this is also worth exploring. So this is one way how to get it. And the second move where e5 doesn't really work is the traditionally considered the main line, the most aggressive move in the Najdorf, which is the move bishop g5. Here again e5 is bad because simply knight f5, bishop f5, e5, the bishop is exactly where it needs to be, targeting that knight and gaining control over the light square. So bishop c4, knight d5, and this is pretty bad for black. So with bishop c4 you could explore Kramnik's ideas, but in this video I will concentrate on the move bishop g5. And nowadays, apart from the standard move e6, black frequently goes with knight b7. It was discovered that this is not so bad, as it was considered in the 50s and the 60s, where there were some very nice victories by Tal, Keres, and Spassky, and so forth with the white pieces. But nowadays it's considered fine. And here, actually, the move does not have an independent value because we will continue in the same manner as against the let's call it main move e6. And this manner is actually, now we are getting to the point of combination of the most aggressive bishop g5 and the English attack. So we go f3. And after e6, queen d2. So what we are getting, it's a sort of a compromise, because the bishop is not on e3, it's on g5. And you could say that on g5 is a bit worse, because it kind of blocks the advance of the g-pawn. Yeah. But as a way of compromise, as a type of, in a way, the price to pay for getting these Scheveningen positions with King's Indian attack, sorry, not King's Indian, English attack flair, I think it's a price that a lot of people would be willing to pay. So after e6, f3 is the move. And in fact, this was played several times by none other than Magnus Carlsen in some 2020, plus or minus some years. And he actually got quite good positions in it. So I think it has been somewhat forgotten. I'm not sure why, because, okay, objectively black should be fine, but I think the type of position, the character of the position that white is getting is different than the usual positions after bishop e3, e5 or so forth. And I think they are worth exploring because they are not that explored. And again, it's more about the character of the position than the objective evaluation, which in all cases is black is fine, basically. Yeah. So white is not getting anything in the bishop e3, e5, so why just not try here when there are more chances of an attack? So this is what we are going to look at in this video. So f3. Now basically black can transpose to the normal Scheveningen options of the English attack with an extra tempo by playing h6, when white will drop the bishop to e3 and white will be a tempo down. But like I said, a tempo is still a good price in today's very difficult theoretical times for the white player. It's a decent price to pay to obtain this type of English attack positions and play for an attack. And we will see with the exact moves, things are not bad at all for white. Strictly speaking, except for h6, black has an alternative plan, which is not to touch the king side and just castle more quickly. And this was chosen by Giri against Carlsen in an online game in 2020. So bishop e7, queen d2, castles and long castles. Yeah. So we have again some sort of a English attack type of position, but with the bishop on g5. Now Giri went b5. In case of knight c6, for example, trying to get some sort of a rouser position, then let's say the novel or relatively novel way that the engines have taught us relatively recently is that this opposition of the knights is quite often very kind of favorably resolved in white's favor by simply exchanging those knights. And after bc6, in the past this was considered a concession from white, because this strengthening of the center with a subsequent d5 was considered as a success for black. But in fact, after, let's say, something like h4, d5, g4, turns out that this advance doesn't achieve much, because taking, while possible, leaves these pawns isolated, and black hasn't achieved much, whereas white is simply pushing on the king side. So this is kind of a new understanding for the white ideas in the Sicilian. This capturing on c6, allowing bc6, and then just continuing with the attack. The engines are quite happy to play these types of positions with white. But in the game, Giri went b5, and now a3. Now this is also another thing that the engines have taught us in the 90s, for example, or earlier. It was considered that this a3 move is sort of, again, kind of a weakening, possible weakening, a hook for black on the queen side, but engines actually think it's more important to prevent b5, b4, and keep this knight stable on c3, rather than allowing this somewhat vague hook, for an attack. And the main reason here is that a3 is usually played when black cannot play a quick rook b8 and b4. Then maybe this would make sense to avoid a3. But since black is normally playing bishop b7, b4 is much more difficult to achieve. And therefore, even with long castle, keeping the knight safe on c3 is considered more important. Another insight from the engines. So Carlsen went king b1, knight b7. Yeah? And now we have the, let's say, the standard Najdorf position, similar to the English attack, but again with this bishop on g5. However, with this being said, though, it's worth pointing out that knight c6 here is a better choice. Yeah. Okay. I mean, again, not easy. Knight c6. Then now white can take on c6. Then maybe go on knight e2, knight d4, and so forth. The engine gives something like bishop e3, dropping with bishop back, and now d5. Take on d5, knight d4, bishop d4, knight d5, and bishop d3 with approximately equal position. And this is probably right. I mean, the bishops are nicely lined up, but the center is open and white can't really create indirect threats. But okay, not so easy to come up with this actually for black. Knight bd7 is much more common for the Najdorf player, and here Carlsen misplayed the position. He should have gone h4, and after rook c8, queen e1. And the idea of queen e1 is to continue with g4. The immediate g4 is also possible. Let's say g4, d5, take on f6, knight f6, g5, knight h5, bishop h3, d takes e4. And here we see the idea of queen e1. Had the queen been on e1, white could have gone knight e6, attacking the queen. Here the moves also works, but black exchanges queens. So rook, queen d2, rook d2, take on e6, bishop e6, king h8, take on c8, bishop c8, and knight e4. This is still slightly better for white, because the knight is quite dominating. These pawns on the king side limit the mobility of the bishop on e7. And after all, white has a rook and 2 pawns for 2 bishops. Still sharp, but I would still say objectively a little bit better for white. But it's better to kind of prepare g4 by playing queen e1. And this won't work now. And now again, it's a very tricky position for black, not easy at all, because let's say knight b6, simply g4, knight fd7, f4, and then f5 is coming, and the attack is just coming, and black has nothing on the queen side. Or let's say knight e5, g4, queen c7, and now rook h3. This is an important idea in these positions. White wants to drop back the bishop on c1, continue with g5, but also f4 and have that knight protected on c3. Also, the rook is removed from the long diagonal and some issues there. And again, what does black do? Knight c4, okay, simply take bishop c4, queen c4, h5. Now h6 wants to come, maybe queen h4, and it's very dangerous for black. Tremendous attack. Or let's say knight c6, take on c6, bishop c6, h5 again, threatening h6, and if h6, bishop d2, strengthening the knight on c3 and threatening g5. So you see, white's attack is coming very quickly, and black has achieved nothing on the queen side. In fact, if you go back to the position after queen e1, the engine suggests h5, which I'm pretty sure no human would play. And here the strongest is again rook h3, avoiding the long diagonals problems and intending g4. Again, very, very dangerous for black. So you could see this plan with short castling, it's not, well, quite safe. Let's check what happens after h6, bishop e3, b5. Yeah, so we're getting the English attack, but with the tempo down. Moves show us that actually it's very much playable for white and quite dangerous for black. So a3, stopping b4, we mentioned that this is important. Bishop b7, queen d2, knight b7, long castle. And now we have this position where black has a choice. Yeah, but the main choice is whether black wants to start something quick in the center by pushing d5, or he will play bishop e7 first. Yeah. So let's say d5 immediately. Quite possible. He takes d5, and now black should actually take with a bishop, because taking with the knight, knight e5, knight e5, bishop d5, knight f5 is unpleasant. So the bishop is attacked. Okay, ef5, obviously queen d5, and the knight is annoying there because it prevents the development of this bishop from f8, which needs to stay on f8 to defend the g7 pawn. And if the bishop moves, there is also knight d6 winning the bishop pair. So this is unpleasant. That's why he should take with the bishop, bishop d5, because now knight d5, he can also get the bishop on e3. So queen e1, opening the d file. You can see that this is dangerous. I mean, move by move, black somehow holds, but in practice, this is very, very dangerous. Bishop b7, bishop f4, threatening knight e6 stuff. Yeah, bishop e7, knight e6, f e6, queen e6. Again, the type of position that white likes to play. Now the only move is king f8, knight e4, only move bishop e4, f e4, queen e8, and now again a difficult move for white, b4. Yeah, not one that comes to mind easily, but the idea is to control the c5 square. So queen f7, queen c6, attacking the rook, rook d8, and king b1. Complete mess. Yeah, 2 pawns for the piece, but good compensation. Exactly what white is looking for when playing the English attack. We can also check another version of this, which is after rook c8, king b1, and now d5. Again, e d5, bishop d5, the same reason why not knight d5. Queen e1 again, bishop draws back, bishop f4, bishop e7. So now we have extra moves. We have king b1 by white and rook c8 by black, and this works for black in case of knight e6, because after f e6, queen e6, black has the move rook c6. Still playable for white after queen b3, yeah, but suboptimal, let's say. Yeah. So it's better to go bishop d3, yeah, and after short castle, again, obviously you can see that things are coming up. Bishop h6, knight e6 are 2 moves to consider. Bishop h6 unfortunately only leads to a draw. You can check this yourselves. Let's explore knight e6, which is much more interesting. F takes e6, queen e6, king h8, and queen h3. So you see, again, you could say, black has a relatively safe king, an extra piece, but things are very complicated here. Not so simple at all, because these pieces in the center are not that well placed. For example, the knight on d7, the queen on d8, yeah, and also the king is not so safe because there is this threat of bishop takes h6. Yeah. So even though white is a piece down, 2 pawns for it, there are still tactical threats in the position. Yeah. So now it's possible for black to, let's say, counter sacrifice rook c3, bc3, let's say, knight d5, bishop h6. Yeah, a complete mess. Knight c3 check, king a1, and now the only move for black, bishop h4. Yeah, bishop c1, take on d1, rook d1. Again, very messy position. Likely that this bishop will be lost, but neither king is entirely safe. But white has the bishop pair. Maybe bishop b2 can help safeguard white's king. Another option is after queen h3, queen e8. Yeah, and now again a choice: rook he1 or bishop f5. Yeah, both are possible. Let's say rook he1. Now the only move is knight g8. Yeah, bishop f5. You see, white is playing on the whole board. It's not always against the king, but it's always also against these pieces in the center and the awkward position of the queen. Knight df6 now, bishop c8, and g4. So now white has rook and 2 pawns for 2 pieces, and again with a very messy and unclear position. So you see quite dangerous in many lines for black. Let's go back to the position on move 11 and go bishop e7. Yeah, now we go bishop e2. Now g4 d5 now is working nicely for black because white weakens the long diagonal by the move g4. So we go bishop e2 instead. Yeah. And again, different options for black. For example, in the game Carlsen Vachier-Lagrave and another game Carlsen Svidler, both players play the move h5, stopping g4. Yeah, but let's explore some lines where we can get to see what happens after g4. So let's say rook c8, g4. Yeah, let's check d5 now, h4, d takes e4, g5. You can already, by now you've seen on more than one occasion that the spirit of the English attack that I presented in the game of mine earlier is already present, and the extra move that black got means very little. The mess is here, yeah, and the mess is going to stay, and the mess is very dangerous for black. So hg, take on h1, rook h1, knight d5, check on h8, knight f8, bam on e6, knight e6, fe6, fe4. Again, big mess, and it's very dangerous. Yeah, for example, knight c3, bishop h5, g6, bishop g6 mate. Just one simple line. Yeah. So you can check these things for yourself, and you should if you're interested in the idea. Okay. Here I'm just showing you like the character of the game, some of the main ideas, some of the main options that black has. So it's quite exciting. Yeah. Let's say knight b6, g4, knight f d7. This is a standard regrouping of the knights, but here it's kind of slow. h4, knight e5, and now an important move is not to be afraid to make, which is the move b3. It's again, the king is not really weakened, but it's important to stop the knights from coming to c4. And if rook c8, g5 already. Yeah. So again, white's attack is crashing through, and it's much faster than black's. So I can continue the line. Let's say d5, g takes h6, bishop a3 check, king b1, bishop b4. Looks scary, yeah, because the knight is pinned, but just in time. Bishop g5 check, bishop g5 attacking the queen, queen d6, hg7 attacking the rook, rook g8, and knight db5 with a tempo, all with tempo. Very, very sharp, but very nice too. ab5, knight b5, still attacking the queen, queen c6, and now queen c1. So the king is safely defended, and the pawn is coming. Yeah. Very sharp position, but good for white. And okay, just to show you that it's also sometimes possible to play in a more positional way. Let's say d5, e5, knight e5, knight e5, bishop d5, knight f5. Yeah, the same idea. Yeah, white, black doesn't really have a choice, must castle, but simply take on e7, queen e7, and queen b4. Okay? Seeking the exchange and playing the endgame with a pair of bishops. Sometimes this is also possible. Yeah. So let's check the move h5, rook hg1 as a preparation of a later g4, rook c8, and king b1. So both sides are preparing basically their attack. Now in the game Carlsen Vachier, the French player played knight b6. Carlsen went queen e1, intending e5. That's why he opened the d file. Knight f d7, and now g4. And now we see the idea of rook hg1. After h takes g4, rook takes on g4, and the rook is active on the g file. And in fact, here Vachier made a mistake. He played bishop f8, after which white was much better. He actually should have gone g6 or king f8 even. But after g6, he was likely afraid of the rook takes g6. Luckily for black, if he knows the line, he should be able to draw with the only move in this position, rook takes c3. Queen takes c3, now knight a4 first. Queen b3, now take the rook on g6. Knight e6, queen c8, knight g7, king f8, knight e6, and white doesn't really have more than a perpetual check. Yeah, sharp stuff, yeah, but very nice one. Another move, for example, instead of knight b6, let's say knight e5. Here bishop g5. This is a typical idea when white has played, black has played h5, because the g5 square now, the bishop cannot be removed from there, and the plan is no longer g4, but rather f4 and e5. So keep this in mind, the change of track. So queen b6, f4, knight c4, take on c4, and let's say rook c4, e5, and white has a big advantage. Yeah, so very dangerous position for black again. So Svidler played a good move, queen c7. Carlsen returned to g5. I mentioned this idea. Queen b6. And here actually it was a curious situation, because Carlsen actually returned with the bishop to e3, inviting a repetition, which Svidler avoided. But no need to seek a repetition for white, because g3 is a good move here for white. And it may look slow, but you could see that the game is relatively slow for both sides, and the move g3 is actually preparation for h3 and g4. Now, not immediately h3, because then h4 kind of fixes everything on the queen side, but g3. And let's say knight e5. Okay, now white again changes the plan, going f4, but this was provoked by the knight landing there on e5. Let's say knight c4, bishop c4, rook c4, and now knight rook g1, and again going for e5. So you see, there are quite a few. There is flexibility in white's play depending on how black reacts to these threats of an attack on the king side. But in all cases, it's always very dangerous for black. Objectively, of course, black should be fine. I mean, black is fine everywhere in all decent opening lies and variations. But it's just that opening theory, modern opening theory, is such that we must try to look for a character of the game that we would like to play. And I think that a lot of Najdorf players are kind of with nostalgia. White players against the Najdorf with nostalgia are thinking or remembering these days of the 80s and 90s when you could sack your way to the opponent king. Or those players who were not born there, maybe looking at the games by Kasparov and other attacking players, are looking, how can I get this type of position to sacrifice? And I think this idea with bishop g5 and f3, somewhat forgotten. I don't know why. It's actually, I think, worth more attention than it's getting. So this is the latest idea from my opening explorations. I hope you liked it, and if you did, well then please smash that subscribe button. I would really appreciate it. And leave a comment. Tell me what you think about this video. Tell me what you think about the line, if you liked it. And also, if you like it, subscribe to my weekly Substack. Every week, the same day as this video, released at exactly the same time, you will get a short essay on a chess topic into your email inbox. And if you become a paid subscriber of my Substack, then you can and you should take advantage of the fact to ask what topic of the next video on my channel should be, and I will of course do it. So thanks guys for watching, hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you soon, very soon. Take care all.